What's the scariest thing you've seen that no one believes you about? It would help if I had pictures to explain the setting here, but I used to fish at an abandoned house's pond near my home. Next to that property was a wealthy neighborhood of about 6 houses, mansions. One day, while getting off the bus, I saw a black Mercedes with fully tinted windows, which is rare in New Jersey, sitting in the driveway of the pond house. I found it odd and was kind of sad because I thought I'd never get to fish there again. The next day, I found out the man who lived at the end of the wealthy neighborhood had been shot in the head while he slept. Rumor has it he was involved in the mafia. I believe those rumors. I was sleeping at my cousin's house on New Year's Eve 2014. My 3 cousins, brother and I all decided to sleep in the same bedroom as our parents were staying out all night. We were old enough to stay at home on our own. The point is, we were 100% the only people in the house that night and all slept in the same place. Woke up the next day and was getting in the car to leave when I had to look at my camera roll from the previous night. To my absolute horror, there were 5 photos of us all sleeping. Every single person was in the photos fast asleep, so there was no way any of us took those pictures. My aunt showed the photos to the landlord and he had no explanation. To this day, nobody knows who took them. Oh boy, this is a scary one. Do you think it was the landlord? I'm assuming he'd have the key. Maybe he'd have known the adults were away for the night. Yeah, not hard. Most phones allow you to use the camera without unlocking it. And if he left his phone on a table or something, then easy enough to use it. Right after high school, class of 91, I got a contract job with the Forest Service. We traveled all over the West doing gopher control in replanted clear cuts. The gophers would eat the tender roots of the newly planted saplings, and we had to control them to give the trees a chance to get started. We were returning to our hometown after a long job in Oregon, driving across the desert near a government lab. It's about 3 a.m. and we're going at about 80 in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. Suddenly, a semi-truck, completely blacked out, no lights at all, bombs past us on this stretch of highway like we were standing still. Then, 2 army-style trucks also blacked out. Scared the crap out of us. We got back to our hometown and told several people what we saw, and no one would believe us. I still think they were doing freaky crap out there in that desert lab. If we'd tried to chase them or anything, we probably would have disappeared. In short, freaky blacked-out government trucks from a secret lab blew past us in the dark. I've never even heard of something like that, but that's just the thing. You wouldn't hear about something like that. You got a fleeting glimpse at something very secret there. My uncle used to live in Nevada near an Air Force base, and he saw stuff like this all the time. He said the scariest one was a blacked-out semi his hopped-up muscle car couldn't keep up with. Crazy stuff out there. No telling what goes on. My dad had top-secret clearance in the Air Force base and still clams up and gets weird about UFO stuff and secret tech. See, I'm not a big believer that there are aliens being hidden in Area 51 or anything, but stuff like this is absolutely riveting. What's being developed and being shipped around under the cover of darkness in these definitely not Secret Service mobiles? When I was little, 7 or 8, I woke up one night to a white dog sitting in the doorway of my bedroom. That was weird because we didn't have a dog or any other indoor pets. While I watched, it got up and went down the hall towards the living room. I got up, looked down the dark, empty hall, and went the opposite direction to my parents' room. I woke my mum up and told her there was a dog in the house. She got up and we looked, but didn't find anything. She thought I was dreaming. At some point when I was older, I found a picture of the dog my parents had when I was a baby. I learned from my mum that the dog often slept in the doorway guarding my room. But the dog died before I was 2. The dog in the picture was the dog I saw that night. In college, I had a summer internship in a national park that had just ended a wolf reintroduction program. A number of interns were housed in an area of cabins clustered together on a 1-lane gravel road. I was staying in a different area of the park and had gone over to the cabins for dinner one night. I left pretty late, close to midnight, and was enjoying the quiet walk down the road to my car. It was a clear night with a full moon, and the conifers growing on either side of the road shaded it almost entirely. As I'm walking, I see a light-colored shape on the other side of the road coming in my direction. I kept walking slowly, and as we drew towards each other, I saw that it was an enormous canid of some sort. Far too big to be a coyote, but as far as we know, all the wolves had been relocated. We each kept our pace, and it never turned its head or anything, just kept walking. I somehow managed not to pee myself, but by the time I got into my car, I was shaking so hard that I could barely get my key in the ignition. Everyone I've told thinks I was exaggerating, but I was stone-cold sober, less than 10 feet from it, and that animal's back was up to my waist, easily the biggest dog creature I've ever seen. To clarify, I did see it clearly in the moonlight when it was close. It had the coloring and general characteristics, like a narrow head, snout shape and ears, of a light-phase coyote, but the bulk and size of a wolf. Larger than any Great Pyrenees I've ever seen. Looking back, it was definitely a benign encounter. Just two folks out for a stroll, passing each other on the street. Was this by any chance at Yellowstone? Only asking because I visited there several years ago, and we became friendly with a waiter in a restaurant who told us about the huge wolf that they have that wanders the park. He said he saw it once and it was nearly twice the size of a regular wolf. He also said it wasn't aggressive or anything, just looked at him for a bit before walking away. I'm not sure about any relocation programs in Yellowstone, but it sounds like it might be the same wolf. Doing a service call on an apartment, and this lady has an obvious obsession with dolls, like those 15-inch tall Pioneer-looking dolls. She's not home, so I go about my business, very uncomfortable, and even more so when I enter her bedroom. She literally has more than 300 dolls with doll heads tied to strings from the ceilings, and a small little altar-like thing in the corner of her bedroom, with a severed chicken head, and gargoyle-like statues and pictures of children. There's a pig's hoof hanging from a red cord in her bathroom. When I got to the dining room, there's a Ouija board and multiple dolls all arranged around a dismembered doll that's drenched in what I think was blood. I think I broke the human top speed record that day, and nobody believes me about it. It was probably voodoo, and Wazir had performed a blessing for the children in the photo. Spend some time in Haiti, and the old woman would do this with photos of people they cared about. The goats and chickens throw most people off, but it was probably a caring grandma just doing her ritual to make sure the kids were safe today. Maybe that isn't what's going on, but I'd just tell myself that. For my own sake of being able to sleep tonight, I'm going to assume that all the stuff was fake and she was messing with you. One day I walked into my leather couch ripped open. I lived alone. My mum and I were driving through rural Missouri late one night. It was dark and hard to see much beyond the headlights. All of a sudden, something scampered across the road in front of our car. We didn't hit it, but when it got to the other side of the road, on the shoulder, it sat up on its hind legs, turned around and looked directly at us. It had a long, thin tail, too thin to be a foxtail, too big in general to be a squirrel or possum. To this day, we both swear it was a monkey. People don't believe us, but the way it turned back and looked at us once it got to the other side of the road was so chilling and human-like. Based on the size, shape, and movement, it could only be some sort of primate. My mum used to yell at me to close the pantry door, and one day when I was home alone, I got a snack and left the door open. As I was walking away, the door slammed shut and I heard a voice say, "Close it." Quietly but intensely. I swear I literally grabbed my dog and ran faster than I've ever run before up to my room and locked the door. Let's just say I literally will never forget to shut that damn door again. Can you imagine being so slovenly that even the ghosts in your building start telling you to get your crap together? Talk about a wake-up call, man. I once walked into my living room to see a football that I've never seen before lying in the middle of the room vertically. It fell on one side where I guess it noticed me and proceeded to roll into the kitchen behind the counter and out of view. After standing there from awe and confusion, I went to look for it and it wasn't there. Never saw that again. In high school, I briefly dated a gothy chick whose idea of a good time was to hang out, and occasionally make out in the old graveyard at the edge of town. Not my favorite thing in the world, but she was cute and I was 16, so there you have it. One night she told me to meet her there. The place was dark and empty as always. I had my phone flashlight and was poking my way through the headstones to the tree that was our usual meetup spot, when I saw some movement in my peripheral vision. Turned the light to where I thought it was in time to see a silhouette move behind a headstone about 30 yards away. I was sure it was her trying to scare me, which sometimes she did, and I called out to her, and in response I heard a female voice, but not hers, call the same name back to me, like it was mocking me. I turned and sprinted back to the road. I texted her from my car. She said she hadn't left her house yet. I cancelled on her and drove home. In my hometown, in Massachusetts, there's a colonial-era graveyard where I used to enjoy walking at night. I saw an odd-shaped gravestone that I didn't remember seeing before, much lighter color than the others, and as I got closer it seemed to be moving. I was really intrigued. Got closer and it was two people screwing. Oops, wasn't even that late. My friends and I used to frequently visit the abandoned Joseph P. Ladd School. It was rumored to be haunted. Most of the time I just assumed the noises were other people on the property. I'd never experienced anything supernatural there, just, scared because of the circumstances of what could happen. One of the last times I was there, I brought my crowbar because the state had started boarding and welding doors shut. So here I am trying to pry open a small enough gap between these two doors. There was a good 6-inch space between them where it was open. After a few tries, I'm getting pretty aggravated, saying to myself, is this freaking worth it? It was pretty well late night and the moon was really bright, so I didn't need my flashlight unless I was inside a building. Also, I didn't use it because of the risk of alerting security. So I'm peering through these 2 doors down this hall with my flashlight, and about 50 feet down the hallway, it looked like some light dust came into view. So the dust entered where my flashlight was aimed, and then suddenly, it turned. I could see the cloudy, barely visible outline of a chest, shoulders, and head. Nothing else. As it turned, I can still vividly remember what appeared to be the ghostly, misty outline of shoulders and a head moving towards the flashlight. So, as any person would, I ran away and screamed. Never have I been so scared in my life. New England is the best when it comes to spooky legends. Rhode Island has more legends than it does square feet. Lovecraft's quote sums it up perfectly. Searchers after horror haunt strange far places. For them are the catacombs of Ptolemies and the carven mausolea of the nightmare countries. They climb to the moonlight towers of ruined Rhine castles and falter down black cobwebbed steps beneath the scattered stones of forgotten cities in Asia. The haunted wood and the desolate mountain are their shrines, and they linger around the sinister monoliths on uninhabited islands. But the true epicure and the terrible, to whom a new thrill of unutterable ghastliness is the chief end and justification of existence, esteems most of all the ancient, lonely farmhouses of backwoods New England. For there the dark elements of strength, solitude, grotesqueness, and ignorance combine to form the perfection of the hideous. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Was with a bunch of kids playing around the street when I noticed a floating stick. There's no trees around and everyone else saw it. Put my hands around it to make sure it wasn't a spider's web or a string, but it was definitely floating. The moment I touched it, it fell. Still can't explain it to this day. I was driving to South Dakota to visit family, and I drove all night. Around 7 a.m., tired, almost 45 minutes to my destination, I looked east from the highway, and deep in the plains there was this huge golden bridge silhouetted structure. Mended with the clouds and the sparkle of the sun, it almost looked like heaven. I mean, it looked small from the car, but I understand depth perception, and up close that would be a huge Golden Gate-sized structure. Looks like it stretched from north to south as far as I could see. Rubbed my eyes? Still there. I just remembered thinking, I'm tired as heck. I've driven this road many times and there isn't anything this way except grassy plains. Fast forward maybe a year or two, I'm back in South Dakota working for the summer with my family. One day for work we had to drive down the same road about 8 a.m.-ish when one of the guys goes, I remember this one morning, we were driving down the same road for work and this golden bridge-looking thing, huge as frick, was on the horizon over there, pointing to the east where I saw it years earlier. All of a sudden, instantly when he said that, I remembered that moment from years earlier. I remembered it because I thought I was hallucinating, but they described exactly what I saw. This is South Dakota, and there isn't a huge golden bridge-looking object anywhere in the state. It still baffles me to this day. I try not to think too much on it because I haven't seen it since. Weird as heck though. Every time I visit my family, I look to the east on that same stretch of road, but I haven't seen it again. My buddy and brother's evidence of seeing it only validated that I wasn't crazy and that they saw the same thing. I was about 4 to 6 years old and my mother was telling me to get ready for bed. I remember hopping on the bed and going straight for the window. I pulled open the curtains dramatically. I was face to face with a giant fly or moth head. Its face was staring straight at me and was huge, almost like a mask pulled over someone's head. I became hysterical trying to express what I saw and was told it was in my imagination. Now, this was in the window to the backyard. Our house was on a foundation above ground, so that window was about 10 feet off the ground. It's been over 17 years and I remember that creature staring back and the sheer horror of its eyes. Can't bring myself to look out the window at night now. My friend, I think you experienced whatever the equivalent of Pennywise was in your area, and you really need to get the heck out of there before he comes back after his long sleep. When I was 17, I was up late one night watching a movie in my living room. I was living in a condo at the time, a smallish building, only 3 stories, so not a lot of people. It was mostly middle-aged people and in the nice end of town, so we rarely heard noise from neighbors, especially late at night. So the movie ends and the credits roll. It's about 2 a.m. I'm playing on my phone and the condo is pretty quiet. Suddenly I hear a noise coming from the front door. It sounded like a long nail or claw slowly dragging across the door, and then a soft tap tap tap. This repeats several times. Meanwhile, I'm crapping myself. It was the most eerie, ominous sound. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I was too scared to look out of the peephole because I thought whatever it was might see my shadow looking out, as lights were on near the door. Who knows what they want? I'm not out here trying to die. The horrible scratching noise carries on for about 30 seconds and then stops. 20 minutes later, I got the guts to go and look in the hallway and nothing was there. And no marks are on the door. I still get the heebie-jeebies thinking about it. When I was 3 or 4 years old, I had a best friend named Abigail. We did everything together. Played in the sandbox, creeks and rivers, playgrounds, you name it, we were sidekicks. I even drew her portrait one day and told my mum to save it somewhere safe so I could give it to her on her birthday. I still have it somewhere, but I drew a girl with dark shoulder-length hair with a red bow in it. She was wearing a blue jumper-like dress with a long-sleeve red shirt under it, and brown shoes. I just remember I loved playing with her, and then one day I just never saw her again. Now, if this were my mum telling the story, she would just say that at this age, I was an independent little girl who liked to play and be by myself. She just thought Abigail was an imaginary friend. Until one day, when I was about 11 or 12 years old, the local historical society posted a researched historical article detailing the events of a tragic farmhouse fire that happened about 75 or 80 years prior on the property that our subdivision was built on. The fire was a devastating one in which a family of 6, 2 parents and 4 kids, were all killed. One of those kids was a 4-year-old and her name was Abigail. A picture of the family was included in the article, black and white, but you could clearly see the little girl had dark shoulder-length hair with a bow in it and was wearing a jumper with a long-sleeve shirt under it. To this day, my mum still refuses to believe my best friend was probably a ghost. My brother-in-law had an imaginary friend when he was very young, and he is absolutely convinced to this day that she's a ghost. He said they'd play together all the time, and even though he had 3 older brothers, he preferred to play with her. He recalls her waking him up in the middle of the night to play football with him in the hallway outside his bedroom, and he would always get up and play even though he knew he would get in trouble for it, because if he didn't, he said she would sit next to the bed and cry. She wore a red dress and little black shoes. He also remembers the last time he played with her. She told him she would have to leave soon and he wouldn't ever see her again. He was devastated and asked her why, and she replied that he was getting too old now. He's a big, super strong, no-nonsense, kind of intimidating guy these days, but when he talks about his little friend, he gets very serious and emotional. It's real to him. I used to live in an old 3-story row house with my father, mother, and older brother. It was fairly typical in that it made some old house sounds and had some areas that never really saw natural light, like the staircase and downstairs hallway. It was a pretty normal place, but in the late 80s, my father self-deleted. Over the course of about a year, we had a multitude of unusual happenings in the house. Most things small, shadows moving and objects not being where you left them, but some things, borderline violent, happened too, like an old lamp exploding and doors slamming shut. I was primarily the person who saw these things happening. That leads me to the biggest incident. I've told my mother, my brother, and some friends, and now my wife, but no one thinks it happened the way I remember it. I was 9 years old. My father had been gone for almost a year. I was sitting on my bed reading when a young man, maybe in his late 20s, looking disheveled and confused, opens my bedroom door. Startled, I shout, "Mom! There's a guy in my room!" He stood there for a second and looked straight ahead. "What do you want?" I asked, and he walked straight through my room and through the wall that connected to the neighbors as if he was immaterial. Immediately next door, I heard a scream of blood-curdling terror from my neighbor. She was screaming and crying loudly, and you could hear physical commotion. I kept shouting for my mum, who came in and comforted my crying and terrified 9-year-old self. I told her what had happened, and she could hear the screaming next door. She went over to the neighbor's house to find out what was going on. The neighbor's husband opened the door. Turns out his wife had just in that moment of screaming found out her brother had self-deleted. Now, I'm nearly 40 and I don't talk about these times very often. I don't know what it was, I don't know if I was crazy. I don't believe in ghosts. Looking back on those times, a lot of things didn't make sense. My family never really saw or experienced things on the same magnitude I did, so I've kind of kept it quiet. A light. I was alone on a forested, snow-covered mountain and there was a bright light just sitting in the middle of the trail. It was there all night. In the morning, there was nothing there. This is one of those horror movies where you're thinking, "Frickin' seriously, dude? You're going to investigate the spooky light? Of course there's a monster there. Don't go over there, you dumb idiot. I'm glad you didn't go check it out and get eaten. But I also want to know what the heck that light was. Perhaps next time, just have a quick look with your binoculars or something and report back to us." Listen, you started off sounding smart, but everyone who's seen a horror movie knows that if you look through binoculars, a monster will jump right up in front of you from nowhere while you're looking and jump scare/disembowel you. A white, smiling face at my window as I was laying down for bed. It was glowing as if it were a light source. And it had no nose that I can remember, just slits like a snake. Eyes had no color, just black pupils. Its mouth was wider than any human's. No hair either. And the height from the ground to my window is about 8 feet, and it was perfectly at eye level. My mother checked all around and there was nothing, but I swear to God I saw it and it was a person. She still teases me about it from time to time. When I was about 7 or 8, my neighbors had walkie-talkies and we would all play with them in the neighborhood and talk. For some reason, I changed my station because I couldn't hear them anymore. Then an older gentlemanly voice comes on and starts talking to me. He was telling me he was my uncle and his daughter was crying and he wanted me to say her name over and over to comfort her. Young me starts doing it and then I stopped because I freaked out. I ran and told my parents what happened and they didn't believe me. I've never touched one since because I know it was some perv getting off on it. I saw a UFO with my mother in Oregon one night. We were traveling when I spotted a triangle shape in the sky, formed by 5 bright lights. We stopped the car, got out and looked, and it's just hovering there, silently with no movement. I should have taken pictures or a video, but I was so caught up in the moment because I couldn't make out what I was seeing. Out of nowhere, this thing shot off into the horizon, faster than any man-made machine. We both remember clear as day, however very few people believe our story. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.